Hello, class, and welcome back to Radio 2. My name is Noni Kumalo, and we are just taking a deep dive into what digital measurement is all about. We are still speaking about researching the audience, but today we get a little bit deeper into the digital space. So I want you for a second to take a look at your roadmap for this lesson. The introduction states, in lesson 3 of research, we will delve deeper into understanding that different radio environments have various quantitative measurement tools. We will look at PPM and how it works and start examining digital platforms and how we make use of them for collating data. The learning outcomes for this lesson: use the following outcomes as a personal checklist to assess your readiness for future assessments. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe what a PPM is and how it is used, outline other digital methods of research and data collection, and understand the differences and similarities between BRC and PPM. A lot of the content for understanding these terms are going to come from your 2 prescribed textbooks, Beyond Powerful Radio as well as Next Level Radio. What to read in Beyond Powerful Radio is chapter 34, specifically the Portable People Meter, which is the PPM, and in your Next Level Radio textbook, chapter 11, page 426 to 430. All right, so we're going to be looking into those textbooks rather in order for us to get the information for today. Do ensure that you participate in the online discussion forum on Core Campus, and if you need any help, you can definitely email me. All right, nontlantla@boston.co.za. Alternatively, ask the questions in our Radio 2 WhatsApp group. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into our slides, which I'm going to share in a bit. And in the meantime, make sure that you've got both textbooks because we are going to be reading from them today. As we wait for our slides to load, please grab your Beyond Powerful Radio textbook. That's where we're going to be reading from first, as we wait for the PowerPoint presentation to open up. All right, so what is the PPM, the Portable People Meter? All right, if you want to know what this is, as I mentioned, please make sure that you grab your Beyond Powerful Radio textbook and turn to page 472. I'll wait for a second for you to turn to page 472, page 472. All right, let's read this together. The Portable People Meter. In the United States, radio's prime research data gathering system is in transition, moving from diary-based research results to electronic measurements of Nielsen Audio's PPM. PPM offers immediate, up-to-the-minute results 24 hours a day. Here's how it works. Listeners are given a small device to carry with them every day. This device or meter then electronically tracks and measures every radio station they listen to and the length of time they spend listening. PPM has moved into most of the US major markets, though some cities, particularly in smaller markets, still measure listening using diaries. The difference between using diaries and electronic measurement is the immediacy of the data. Initial PPM results have shown that listeners are more fickle than broadcasters had to believe. While loyal to stations they like, when they are bored, that loyalty can quickly shift. The variety of stations people choose was also a surprise. Typical listeners average 6 stations while driving. We did mention that there are quite a number of people, right, that change stations, but they also those exclusive listeners that only listen to one. Very rare, but they exist. They might use one for music, another for traffic, yet another for news or talk. They listened to different types of music formats, and most tuned out when they heard long commercial sets, of course. Because we now know how quickly the listener tunes out if he or she is bored, the principles of powerful radio, making the content relevant to the listener, are more important than ever. What kept listeners present through a commercial set was if they were told there was a specific feature, traffic or sports scores. coming up at specific times. This strategy is called appointment listening. Just as programmers in the days of diary ratings programmed across the quarter hour to get credit for more time spent listening, programmers are now learning how they can stretch and manipulate listening habits in order to make the PPM work for them. So that is a nice little summary of what PPM is. But if you take a look at our slides, in a nutshell, PPM offers immediate up-to-the-minute results 24 hours a day. Pager-like device that's always with you and records what you listen to without having to fill in a survey. Through data direction and GPS technology, it can record what stations the respondent is being exposed to. Radio frequencies sent by radio stations can be encoded with data that can be decoded by the PPM. PPM has a movement sensor to ensure it's always on the respondent. And it can pick up dates and times as well as how long you listen. Data picked up is then collated and weighed down to represent a group of people, similar to paper diaries. And the advantages of the PPM is that you don't have to remember what you listen to, and everything is recorded automatically, as compared to your radio diaries where you need to fill out a form. Data is more precise as it collects up-to-the-minute data. RAM can only provide an approximation on all quarter hours based on what the listener remembers listening to. The disadvantages of PPM, on the other hand, is that it measures the most prominent tagged media in the room. For example, if you're listening to the radio with the TV on, it will pick up the TV. Or if you've fallen asleep with the PPM on, it will measure that you are listening as long as you move every other minute. It is expensive and has to be kept charged, and you have to commit to wearing it for a full year. So those are the major disadvantages of the PPM. Now, most media businesses are trying to find ways to convert the listeners into users of their digital content streams. If a radio station can get listeners to engage with the content online, they can learn more about how listeners consume and respond to content. Now, moving on to digital measurement, I've got quite a number of pieces of paper here in order to reference the textbook. We're going to move on to next level radio, and I'm going to tell you now which page to turn to, as there are quite a number of notes that I've tagged here on the book. All right, you can then turn to page 428. I'm going to give you a second to get to that page. Page 428, digital measurements. We're going to get a nice little explanation of what digital measurement is and the type of variables that exist in that type of measurement. I'm going to give you a split second just to quickly get to that page. Ready? All right, great. Now, digital data measurement is extremely versatile and can range from basic geological data, such as where the person is listening from, to rich data that contains the media owner's cell phone numbers, identity number, email address, and even social media handles. The value of collecting such rich data is that when these databases are cross-referenced with other sets of information, they can begin to tell stories about users that include where users travel, what they buy, and what adverts work for them. With this information, advertisers can begin to understand how to target their adverts better in order to reach their potential customers. The benefits of any media content platform include a large and varied audience reach, coupled with the ability to tell very comprehensive stories about its users. This is why Facebook, for example, has dominated in the social media advertising space. The site has large numbers of users and knows almost everything about these users, such as their demographics, their interests, their relationships, their likes, and much more. The data it has on its users is then used to target particular advertising messaging to those users and prevent the advertisers from spending money on users who would not be receptive to the messages. In advertising, this is called wastage. What is the point? The biggest problem that terrestrial radio stations face is that the data they can collect from their users is limited. As shown in the previous example, RAM diaries give terrestrial radio stations basic information but cannot give them the granular detail a platform like Facebook collects on their users. This means that advertisers who are looking for particular users will go to platforms where they can guarantee that their adverts are being seen by the correct users. In order for terrestrial radio stations and audio creators to continue to make money off advertising and for them to compete with the major global technology and digital companies, they will need to move many of these users over to digital platforms where they can begin to obtain detailed information about the customers of the audio content. We're going to then turn over to page 429. One critical aspect to remember about digital data is that if stations can incentivize users to give them more data, their data offering can be much more valuable to clients, and they can make better content decisions for their listeners. Another important source of data is that the social network platforms for radio stations themselves. Each radio station utilizes social media platforms to share, advertise, and to promote content and to engage with their listener base. These pages are monitored, populated, and managed by radio station staff, and they can be rich sources of information that helps to tell better stories about the listeners and their communities. The following example is of analysis of information a station can source from the active Facebook and Twitter users. Now, a great way for you to see the practicality of what information that you can get from Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms can do. Now, the social media report. The overwhelming majority of users is between 15 and 24 years of age. The second largest group is between 25 and 34. The audience is currently 66% female. Top 5 areas where users are located in rank order are as follows: Cape Town CBD, Greater Cape Town, Knysna, Johannesburg, and Pretoria. Users are concerned with their career, property, renting and buying, car buying, investing, starting a family, holidays, entertainment and friends, music, movies and series, and making money. Users want to know how government, law, politics will influence their career, their lifestyle, money, family, and hence there's also a strong affinity for news content rather. Users have the latest technology and devices, but are not necessarily early adopters of technology. For example, they own the latest Huawei, Samsung, and Apple devices and use Chrome and Android WebView, but they do not necessarily know about the overall developments in technology and digital media. The majority of the users access the station's social media platforms via the mobile web, so long videos or audio are not the best content to produce due to the current limitations. Great information and research that we're receiving from this radio station. Now, the main content interests: Africa, business, lifestyle, local news, opinion, politics, sports, and weather. The granular topics, on the other hand, are movies, series, celebrities, viral, funny, entertainment, education, universities and government, property, consumer, technology, concerts, events, traffic, crime, law, health, and the world. Now note that this analysis has been performed by the author using analytics from an anonymous radio station's Facebook and Twitter platforms. The details of the station, however, have been changed in order to protect the privacy of the data. The data set provided is a good example of the targeting and content shaping that can be done with the data given to radio stations by their digital communities. The aim for all media businesses must be to grow their digital and social media users in order to gather more granular and useful data about their users. The following table showcases a comparison of social media community sizes that have been built by different stations. A report like this is drawn up regularly by the stations in order to compare where and how their listeners are engaging with them and to benchmark themselves alongside other radio stations. This type of report cannot tell whether fans of the station are duplicated across platforms. Example, if they are following the station both on Facebook and Instagram, or whether there is a duplication across different radio stations. Example, A user follows 5FM, 947, and YFM. As a result, the total numbers in the table do not mean the listeners practice exclusively, meaning that they would only be using one platform at a time. This data, however, does not allow the stations to understand how social media savvy and dependent their users are and what types of platforms they like to use to engage with and share content. All right, so do take note of that. So here are some numbers that we can look at on social media based on the different radio stations, 5FM, 947, and YFM. Majority of them, looking like a lot of the users, come from Facebook and Twitter, as seen. All right, Pinterest, not so much. It just goes to show that they are more engaged in social media platforms that are a lot larger, like your Facebook, Twitter, as well as your Instagram. Many of them also downloading the mobile app of the radio stations, because I guess that's where we target them to go in order for us to also collect our own form of data. All right, fantastic. Now, let's look at the slides giving us a synopsis of what digital measurement is. It is extremely versatile and can range from geolocated date, where a person is listening from, to rich data that contains a media owner's personal information. The value of collecting such rich data and cross-referencing with other sets of information is that they can begin to tell stories about the users, like where they travel, what they buy, and what ads work for them. This means that advertisers can begin to understand how to target their audience better so they can reach their potential customers. The benefit of any content media platform include a large and various audience reach, along with being able to tell very detailed stories about their users. This is why Facebook has dominated in the social media advertising space for a while now. The data that is used rather to target particular advertising messages to those users. This prevents wastage. Terrestrial radio stations have limited data, as RAM diaries give basic information but can't give them the granular data that, for example, Facebook can. This means that advertisers who are looking for particular users will go to platforms that can guarantee their adverts are being seen by the correct people. In order for terrestrial stations to keep making money off advertising, they will need to move many of their users over to digital platforms. Digital migration and registered users of a media company's data that was previously inaccessible. So for instance, YFM has a YFM app that you download, right? And in there, you need to fill out your details of who you are, how old you are, are you male, are you female, or you prefer to be called other, right? So in there, we get to follow all your responses, but we're also very sure about the person who's using the app. This allows these companies to understand their users better and sell these users back to advertisers. This process minimizes wastage. The key is to get users to sign up or log in to access the content from the media user. The future of digital radio is to use digital measurement data to enable radio programmers to understand each listener. Through this digital data mining, station managers will be able to target individuals directly. They will also be able to substitute music for more preferred customized playlists and be better able to understand their target markets through their other web-based activities and use of social media and e-commerce. Now, the BRC and the PPM. Now, let's quickly go back to some of the content that we've already done in class when it comes to research. And let's try again to just remember what the BRC RAM is, and we're going to try and find the difference between that and PPM. Now, page 415, the second last paragraph states that the Broadcast Research Council of South Africa is responsible for administering, monitoring, and compiling RAM. Now, what is RAM? We're going to go back to paragraph 2 on the same page. Radio audience measurement, or RAM, is a tailor-made independent audience survey that is specifically designed for South African radio broadcasters and advertisers to utilize in their business. For radio broadcasters, RAM is a useful way of understanding their audience numbers and movements, both in terms of trends and as benchmarks against their competitors. For radio advertisers, RAM is a useful way of understanding where their target markets are most prominent and, in turn, how to make the best of their radio advertising budgets, content, and messaging. In South Africa, RAM consists of two elements: a series of interviews, which are conducted by field workers who collect information about the composition of South African households that will form part of the RAM survey sample. It is noteworthy that the RAM survey only measures the listening habits of South Africans over the age of 15. The other element is a radio diary, which is a paper document left with each household in the survey sample for the family to complete. The diary asks the members of the household to fill in what radio stations they listen to for each quarter hour per week. So we've already revised this, and now we're trying to see the big difference between BRC and PPM. Now, here are the differences, and also here are the similarities. Now, the BRC gives you quarterly results as opposed to the PPM that gives you immediate results. BRC is paper-based, like we explained, and the advantages of it being paper-based is that it is accessible, you don't need any level of education, and it's less intimidating to use paper as compared to technology. PPM, on the other hand, is a pager-like device. The BRC, you write down 7 days listening as compared to the PPM that you then have to have that device on you for a year. The BRC is dependent on what you remember and write down, and sometimes you could be biased, sometimes that could be swayed, as compared to the PPM, which is a little bit more precise. The similarities, on the other hand, is that data picked up is collated and weighed up and down to represent a group of people. We spoke about samples, and that's what we're chatting about over here. Now, we're going to go through your homework on page 427. Activity 11B. I'll give you a moment to go to activity 11B, question 1 and 2. The questions are as follows, and I'll also give you a minute just to think about it before we get to the answers. Question 1. Provide an innovative idea to get listeners to move from listening on FM radio platforms to radio stations' mobile app. Explain how you plan to entice the users to log into the app and to provide their email address and cell phone number. Question 2 is discuss the advantages and disadvantages of utilizing PPM technology in South Africa. Consider how PPM measurements would differ from the current paper radio diaries that are in use. I'm going to give you a second just to do the homework. Even though it's homework, I want us to do it together now, so that you have an idea of what it is that we covered in the lecture today. All right, keep note of your answers. We will give you the textbook answer, and do remember that, of course, answers may vary. So question 1, provide an innovative idea to get listeners to move from listening on FM radio platform to radio stations' mobile apps. Explain how you plan to entice the user to log into the app and to provide their email address and cell phone number. All right, and here's the answer. You may start by pointing out the advantages of listening via mobile app and comparing these with the disadvantages of FM radio listening. Very important when you're writing your assessments as well as the exams to use this kind of format when you're answering your questions. The advantages of listening on a mobile app could include the following. It is more mobile, so you can listen on the go. There's immediate access on the same device to social media pages to share content that is heard. There's immediate access on the same device to further actions, for example, buying, registering, checking, or investigating further. You can save and listen later. You can return to content you might not have heard live. You could then list ideas that may entice listeners to sign up. Enticements could include the following. Ensure that the listener is free. This involves zero-rated data to ensure that listening via mobile app does not use data. Offer rewards specific to the radio station. For instance, sign up on the app and get the first dibs on concert tickets. Offer emotive benefits. For example, if you share any information with us, you can better understand your needs and can change the content you're listening to in order to better serve your purposes as a listener. You reassure the customer that their data will be protected and will not be used for advertising purposes. Now, these are some of the answers that you can give out when you're answering this specific question. When you're answering question 2, which is as follows, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of utilizing PPM technology in South Africa. Consider how PPM measurements would differ from the current paper radio diaries that are in use. Now, what answer could you give for question 2? I'll give you a second to think about it. You could list any of the following advantages of the PPM. It is mobile, so it picks up radio signals and the respondent moves to different environments. It automatically picks up audio in the listener's surrounds, therefore respondents do not have to be conscious of what they're listening to or remember what they listen to later when they're asked to recall the information. It requires no time from the respondent apart from the time needed to charge the device and ensure that it is kept charged at all times. Information that the PPM picks up uploads to a central computer system without the listener having to manually enter the data. So it's quite convenient. The data is also more precise. A paper diary gives a view per quarter hour, but the PPM can report listening habits minute by minute. Here's some of the disadvantages of the PPM that you could list. It cannot distinguish between all types of media. For example, if a TV and a radio are both on simultaneously, it cannot determine which one really has the listener's attention. It cannot determine whether the wearer or respondent has fallen asleep while listening, and the technology is expensive. This can limit where it can be used safely and how many respondents can carry it. It needs to be kept charged and has to have access to Wi-Fi or reliable internet connection regularly in order to upload data to a central computer system. This represents both an investment of time and habit building by the respondent, as well as a level of accessibility to stable internet connection. With load shedding in this country and big network issues, I'm not too sure if that's possible. There's significant measurement differences between PPM and paper radio diaries. The PPM is overall significantly more accurate than a paper diary simply because there is no human error involved in recording the information. As long as the PPM is kept charged, switched on, and on the person of the respondent at all times, it will feed data to the central computer system where it can be objectively collated and then analyzed by researchers. There is no language or literacy barrier to using a PPM meter. Therefore, in South Africa, only access to reliable power and internet connection would stand in the way of a more accurate RAM survey. So, load shedding stands in the way of us getting more accurate information when it comes to digital measurements and PPM. I hope this was a useful session. Do make sure that you ask me any questions on my email address, which is nonhlanhla@boston.co.za. Alternatively, you could ask the questions in the Radio 2 WhatsApp group. I do hope that this was indeed very useful, and we will see you again in the other session. Goodbye.